At my birthday party, my mom murmured to my sister, "While everyone is here, go and swap the locks at their place." My sister agreed, left for an hour, then came back and whispered, "Mom. There." I never thought my own mother would try to destroy my marriage. But what happened on my 32nd birthday wasn't just a betrayal, it was a meticulously planned ambush, and I almost walked right into it. The cafe buzzed with laughter and the smell of coffee, completely oblivious to the silent war simmering beneath the surface. My wife, Olivia, had thrown me a surprise party, nothing fancy, just close friends, some coworkers, and family. My mom, Eleanor, and my sister, Chloe, had flown in from Nevada, supposedly just to celebrate. That already felt a bit off because Eleanor never made a big deal about birthdays. They showed up at the cafe right as everyone yelled surprise, and Eleanor had this strange energy about her, like she was buzzing with something more than just party excitement. She kept glancing at her phone, then at Chloe, then back at her phone. I just figured she was being her usual controlling self, probably stressing about the cake or something equally unimportant. The party was going great until about an hour in. I was talking to my friend Caleb about the Lakers game, but I had a clear view of Eleanor pulling Chloe aside near the restrooms. Eleanor leaned in close, whispered something, and I saw Chloe's eyes go wide for just a second before she nodded. Eleanor said something else, and Chloe pulled out her phone, typed, and showed it to her. They both looked at the screen. Eleanor nodded with a satisfied smile, and then Chloe grabbed her purse and headed for the exit. The whole thing took maybe 90 seconds, but something about it made my stomach drop. I excused myself from Caleb and caught up with Chloe at the door. She was already halfway out when I asked where she was going. She barely looked at me, mumbled something about needing to grab something from the car, and that she'd be back soon. Her voice was shaky, and she wouldn't make eye contact. Chloe's a terrible liar, always has been. But I didn't push it. I had a cafe full of people waiting for me to cut the cake. She was gone for over an hour. I kept checking the door, kept asking Eleanor where Chloe went, and Eleanor just waved me off with excuses about traffic, pharmacy runs, and phone calls. When Chloe finally came back, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. I mean, ghost white, sweating even though it was 60 degrees outside, her hands trembling when she reached for her water glass. She walked straight to Eleanor, leaned down, and whispered something that made Eleanor's face go from smug to confused to angry in about 3 seconds. I tried to get closer to hear what they were saying, but Olivia pulled me away to talk to her parents, who were leaving early. The rest of the party was a blur of forced smiles and me watching Eleanor and Chloe have what looked like an increasingly heated whispered argument in the corner. Around 9 p.m., everyone started heading out. Eleanor suddenly announced she was tired and needed to get back to her hotel. She hugged me goodbye, held on a little too long, and said something about hoping this year would bring big changes for me. Chloe barely said goodbye at all, just waved from across the room and followed Eleanor out the door. Olivia and I stayed behind to help the cafe staff clean up, which took another 30 minutes. The whole drive home, Olivia kept asking if I'd noticed how weird my mom and sister were acting. I told her I had, but had no idea what was going on. We pulled into our apartment building around 10:15 p.m. I grabbed my birthday cards and leftover cake from the back seat. I remember walking up to our second-floor apartment, thinking about how I'd have to text Chloe tomorrow to find out what the hell was going on with Eleanor. I put my key in the lock, turned it, and nothing happened. I tried again, jiggled the handle, checked if I was using the right key. Olivia was right behind me asking what was wrong, and I told her the lock wasn't working. She tried her key. Same result. That's when I looked down and saw 3 cardboard boxes stacked against the wall next to our door. My boxes. I recognized the handwriting on top, my label maker stickers from when we moved in 5 years ago. My gaming console was visible through the open flap of one box. My winter jacket stuffed in another. I looked at Olivia. She looked at the boxes, and then we both looked at the door. Before either of us could say anything, the door opened from the inside. My mom, Eleanor, was standing there in my apartment with Olivia's spare key in her hand and my wedding photo already taken down from the hallway wall. Behind her, I could see Olivia's suitcases packed and ready by the couch. Olivia pushed past me, past Eleanor, and I heard her say, "What the hell did you do?" in a voice I'd never heard her use before. I followed them inside, and that's when I saw Eleanor's phone on the kitchen counter, screen still lit up. The message thread was open, and I could see it clearly from where I stood. It was a group chat labeled Project Olivia with 3 participants, Eleanor's number, my sister Chloe's number, and a third number I didn't recognize. The last message, sent at 8:47 p.m. from Eleanor, read, "While everyone's here, go and change the locks at her apartment. Get her stuff out before they get home. Olivia, take care of it now." The message below it, from my sister, sent at 8:53, read, "Mom, I think you sent this to the wrong Olivia." I stood there staring at that screen, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. And then Olivia turned around, holding her phone up, showing me the exact same message thread. My mom had 2 contacts named Olivia in her phone, my sister, Chloe Olivia, who goes by her middle name, and my wife, Olivia. She'd sent the instructions to change the locks and pack up my wife's belongings to my actual wife instead of my sister. Olivia's voice was ice cold when she said, "Your mother has been planning to evict me from my own home for 3 months, and she just accidentally showed me everything." The next hour was complete chaos. Eleanor tried to explain, tried to say she was protecting me, tried to claim that Olivia wasn't right for our family. Olivia just stood there scrolling through months of messages on her phone, her face getting paler with every swipe. I grabbed Eleanor's phone off the counter and started reading the group chat myself. The third number belonged to someone named Sarah, and the messages went back to late July, right after I got promoted to senior analyst at my firm. The earliest message from Eleanor read, "He's making $140K now. She's going to take half of everything if we don't act fast." Then another, "Sarah, you deserve this chance." I looked at Eleanor and asked who the hell Sarah was. She pressed her lips together and said nothing. Olivia answered for her, said, "Sarah was Mom's college roommate's daughter, recently divorced, living in Reno. I'd met her exactly once at a family barbecue 3 years ago. I told Eleanor to get out, told her I never wanted to see her again, and she actually had the nerve to say I was overreacting. She said that in 2 years I'd thank her, that Olivia was holding me back from my potential, that Sarah understood family values better. Olivia physically pushed Eleanor toward the door, and I didn't stop her. Eleanor left, still trying to justify herself, saying she'd call me tomorrow when I calmed down. The door slammed, and Olivia and I just stood there in our violated apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes. She gave me an ultimatum right there in the hallway. She said I had 48 hours to figure out exactly how deep this conspiracy went, to talk to my sister and my father, Robert, and to decide if I was capable of setting boundaries with my family. If I couldn't do that, she was done. Not because of what Eleanor did, but because if I couldn't stand up to this level of manipulation, she couldn't trust me to protect our marriage going forward. I told her I'd fix it, and she said she hoped so because she loved me, but she wouldn't live like this. I spent that night at a hotel near the airport. Couldn't even sleep in my own apartment because Olivia needed space, and I needed to think. I barely slept, just kept reading through the message thread over and over. There were details in there that made my skin crawl. Eleanor had been tracking my location through the family phone plan. She knew my work schedule down to the minute. She'd made copies of our apartment keys last summer when she visited for the 4th of July. There was even a message where she discussed hiring a locksmith who wouldn't ask questions. At 6 a.m., I drove to Chloe's apartment across town. Chloe answered the door in her pajamas, looking like she hadn't slept either. I didn't yell, didn't accuse, just asked her to tell me everything. She started crying immediately. Said she'd been against it from the start, but Eleanor was relentless. According to Chloe, this whole thing started when Eleanor overheard me tell Robert on a phone call that Olivia and I were discussing maybe buying a house next year. Eleanor apparently became obsessed with the idea that Olivia was going to trap me with property and children, that I'd never be free to pursue what Eleanor called my real potential. Chloe said Eleanor had always liked Sarah, had stayed in touch with Sarah's mom over the years, and when Sarah got divorced last spring, Eleanor saw an opportunity. The plan was actually insane in its detail. Eleanor was going to stage it so that I'd come home to an empty apartment with a note from Olivia saying she needed space. Eleanor would then comfort me, introduce me to Sarah, who would coincidentally be visiting Nevada at the same time. And by the time I figured out Olivia hadn't actually left me voluntarily, I'd already be emotionally invested in Sarah. Chloe showed me her own phone, a separate thread with just her and Eleanor, where Eleanor had sent her instructions for yesterday. The original plan was for Chloe to go to our apartment during the party, change the locks using the copied keys, pack Olivia's essentials, and leave them in a storage unit Eleanor had already rented. Then Chloe was supposed to come back and act normal. Later that night, after Olivia and I discovered we were locked out, Eleanor would show up with new keys, claim the landlord must have changed the locks for security reasons, let me in alone, and then break the news that Olivia had packed her things and left earlier. The fake note was already written. Chloe had a photo of it. It was typed on Olivia's laptop, which Eleanor had accessed back in July using a password she'd watched Olivia enter. I asked Chloe why she went along with any of this, and she said she didn't really believe Eleanor would go through with it until yesterday when the messages started coming in rapid fire. She said she was planning to warn me after the party, but then Eleanor sent the instructions to the wrong Olivia, and everything fell apart. I left Chloe's place and drove straight to the Airbnb where Eleanor was staying, a little cottage in Henderson that she'd rented for a full week. I used the lockbox code Chloe gave me and let myself in. Eleanor was in the shower, and I had maybe 10 minutes to search the place. I found a folder on the kitchen table, the kind with accordion sides and multiple compartments. Inside was a printout of my work calendar for the entire month. A photocopy of our apartment lease with certain clauses highlighted in yellow. A business card for a divorce attorney named David Chin with a consultation date written on the back, November 8th, my name listed as the client. There were also bank statements, my parents' joint account, and I could see multiple transfers to Sarah's name. 3 payments of $5,000 each, starting in August. $15,000 total. The bathroom door opened, and Eleanor came out in a robe. She saw me standing there with the folder and didn't even look surprised. She asked if I'd calmed down enough to have a rational conversation. I asked her about the lawyer, about the money to Sarah, about every single detail in that folder. She sat down at the kitchen table and explained it like she was discussing a business transaction. She said the lawyer consultation was just preliminary research so she'd know what to tell me when the time came. She said the money to Sarah was an investment in my future, helping Sarah get back on her feet so she'd be stable enough to be a proper partner for me. She said Olivia was fine for my 20s, but now that I was successful, I needed someone who came from the right kind of family, someone who understood ambition. I asked her if she understood that she'd just destroyed our relationship forever. And she laughed. She actually laughed and said I'd forgive her eventually because I always did. She said that in 6 months, when I saw how much better my life was with Sarah, I'd realize she'd done me a favor. She said Olivia was probably already talking to lawyers anyway, that women like her always go for the money first. I walked out without another word, drove back to the hotel, and blocked Eleanor's number on everything. Phone, email, social media, all of it. Then I called my dad, Robert. Robert answered on the second ring, and I could hear he was at the hardware store by the announcement system in the background. I told him he needed to sit down, that I had something to tell him about Eleanor. He said he was in the middle of buying supplies for a deck project and could it wait? I said, no, it really couldn't. And something in my voice made him go quiet. I told him everything. Every single detail, from the group chat to the lawyer to the $15,000. There was silence on the other end for a long time, and then he asked me to send him screenshots of everything I had. I spent 20 minutes forwarding him photos of the messages, the bank statements, the folder contents, all of it. He called me back 30 minutes later, and his voice sounded different, older somehow. He said he'd noticed money missing from their savings account, but Eleanor told him it was for a medical procedure she was embarrassed to discuss. He said Eleanor had been acting strange since summer. Secretive with her phone, taking calls in other rooms, spending hours online shopping, except nothing ever arrived at the house. He said he was going to confront her immediately, and he'd call me back. I drove back to my apartment, and Olivia let me in without saying much. I showed her everything I'd found, walked her through the whole conspiracy step by step. She sat on the couch reading through it all, and I watched her face go through about a dozen different emotions. When she finally looked up, she asked if I was ready to go to Nevada with her. I asked what she meant, and she said we were going to talk to Sarah face to face because she wanted to hear this woman explain why she thought it was okay to accept money to break up someone's marriage. We booked flights that afternoon, landed in Las Vegas at 8 p.m., and drove straight to the address Chloe had given me for Sarah. It was a new apartment complex in Reno, the kind with a pool, a gym, and coded entry. We waited in the parking lot until someone left the building and caught the door. Sarah lived on the third floor, unit 314. Olivia knocked, and when Sarah opened the door, I saw her face go from confused to panicked in about 2 seconds. She recognized me immediately, and then she saw Olivia standing next to me and tried to close the door. Olivia put her foot in the doorway and said, "We just want to talk, and then we'll leave you alone forever." Sarah let us in, and her apartment was nicer than ours, which made sense considering she'd just received $15,000 from my mom. We all stood in her living room, nobody sitting down, and I asked her to explain her role in all of this. She said my mom had reached out to her back in July. Said she was worried about me being in an unhappy marriage. Said she thought Sarah and I would be perfect together. Eleanor told her I'd been talking about leaving Olivia for months but didn't have the courage to do it. Sarah said she was lonely after her divorce, and Eleanor was so convincing, so concerned, that she believed her. The money started coming in August, and Eleanor told her it was to help her get settled and prepare for when I'd need a place to stay after the separation. Sarah showed us her phone, a thread with Eleanor that was even more detailed than the group chat. Eleanor had sent her photos of me from family events, told her about my job and my hobbies, basically created a profile like I was on a dating app. There were messages where Eleanor coached Sarah on what to say when we finally met, what to wear, what kind of interests to pretend to have. The most disturbing message was from 3 weeks ago where Eleanor wrote, "He's going to be vulnerable and confused when this happens. That's when you step in and show him what real partnership looks like. You'll be his soft place to land." Olivia asked Sarah if she ever considered that this was completely insane. And Sarah started crying. Said she realized about a week ago that something was very wrong, but she'd already accepted the money and didn't know how to back out. She said she was planning to return the money and cut contact with Eleanor but hadn't figured out how to do it yet. Olivia just shook her head and said, "You're 34 years old. Figure it out faster." We left Sarah's apartment and drove back to the airport. My dad, Robert, called while we were sitting at the gate waiting for our red-eye back home. He said he'd confronted Eleanor as soon as she got back from her Airbnb, and she'd admitted to everything. She didn't apologize, didn't show any remorse, just said she'd do it again because she knew what was best for her son. Robert said he'd asked her if she understood that she'd just destroyed their marriage, too. And she told him he was being dramatic. He said he was meeting with his own lawyer on Monday morning, that he was done, that 36 years of marriage wasn't enough to overlook something this calculated and cruel. He apologized to me about a dozen times, said he had no idea Eleanor was capable of this level of manipulation. For months later, Olivia and I were sitting in our living room with our lawyer, updating our will and power of attorney. We changed every lock in the apartment again, this time using a company that required 2 forms of ID and a background check. We'd cut off all communication with Eleanor, blocked her on everything, and I'd made it clear to my extended family that anyone who tried to play mediator would be cut off, too. My dad's divorce was almost finalized, and he'd moved into a condo near us, started going to therapy twice a week. Chloe and I were slowly rebuilding our relationship, but it was fragile, and only if she kept Eleanor at a distance. The doorbell rang right as we were signing the last document, and Olivia checked the camera we had installed on our front door. It was my mom, Eleanor, standing there with a gift bag and what looked like a card. Olivia showed me the screen, and we both just sat there watching her ring the bell again. She knocked, called out my name, said she just wanted to apologize properly. We didn't move, didn't make a sound, just waited until she finally left the bag by the door and walked away. Later that night, Chloe sent me a screenshot. It was a message from Eleanor, sent 20 minutes after she'd left our apartment. It read, Plan B. If we can't fix him, we focus on you. That coworker you mentioned, the one who just got promoted, is he single? Let's talk tomorrow. I showed it to Olivia, and she said we should probably warn Chloe's coworker. I said we probably should, but honestly, I was just tired. Tired of my mom's schemes. Tired of being vigilant. Tired of wondering what she'd try next. Olivia took my hand and said we'd deal with it tomorrow. That tonight we were just going to be two people who survived something insane and came out stronger. The gift bag stayed by our door for 3 days before I finally threw it away without opening it. Some things aren't worth knowing. What would you have done in that situation?